So, Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year, Happy New Year. January 4th, 2020. Wow, amazing. How did that happen? Anyway, thanks for everybody who's on the call live right now. Put your phones on mute and so forth. And of course, when you have questions, etc., feel free to ask them live. I should open my chat box here in case anybody has any questions or comments they want to stick in the chat box. I just opened it up for the live people. So, and welcome to all the folks watching the recording now. So, today, January 4th, 2020, my name's Kelvin Chin. I'm going to make this recording public. In other words, not just to my meditation students, so I'm introducing myself to everybody else who doesn't know who I am. I teach meditation, and I call it Turning Within Meditation, and I help people. I guess one way of articulating how I help people in addition to teaching meditation is give people perspectives on how to live life more fully now, in the present, here on planet Earth, which is where, last I checked, we all are. And also those who have belief systems that include the afterlife and so forth. I do work and talk about and educate around my experiences on the other side, etc., etc., for those people who have that belief system as well. Not everybody does, but I help everybody regardless of what their belief system, what the belief system may be. Religious, cultural belief, not so religious, not so cultural belief about the afterlife. Any belief system that people may have, I help them regardless of what their belief system is. They don't have to have my belief system, in other words. Today, a little bit of an unusual, discussion and format today for our session because it's the new year. So I thought, well, let's talk about 2020 and some ideas that I have about 2020 in order to help us live our lives more free from fear. Because those of you who know my work already know that is a focus, that is the main focus of all of my nonprofit work, to reduce fear and anxiety in the world, in individuals and in the world, therefore, again, regardless of culture, belief, etc., etc., etc. So far, I'm up to, I think I'm up to about 32 different countries now. 32 countries, helping people from 32 different countries dealing with reducing their fear around death and dying, or just fears in general. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me what your anxieties are about. We want to get rid of them, and so you can live your life more fully. More productively, more happily, quite frankly. Okay? So that's just a little overview of who I am and kind of the perspective I come from. Today, what we're going to do in terms of format, I'm going to open up the floor to any questions people may have about meditation first, and then we're going to do a group meditation together, a short group meditation together, and then I'm going to do a talk. I'm going to do a talk about 2020. So it's going to be my 2020 vision. We'll play on words there, I realized after the fact, after I'd written it. I'm a slow learner. 2020 vision. So a little bit more clarity about maybe perhaps how to think about our lives going forward, including this new year of 2020. Let me say right off the bat, in case anybody's watching this who does not know me, and they think that I'm a psychic, that I'm going to give you some psychic vision about what Kelvin's vision of 2020 is, like a prediction of 2020. That's not what I'm going to do. That's not what I'm about. There are other people who do that, and that's fine. But I'm into living in the present. So what I'm going to be talking about is a certain perspective to look at 2020, and I'm going to talk about approaches and perspectives and so forth of how to go forward with our lives, especially as it relates to 2020, especially as it relates to certain things that are happening in our world culture today, 2020, to reduce our fears, to reduce our anxieties, so we can be more productive, so we can have a more productive worldwide 2020 and 2021, 2022, etc. Okay? That's going to be my the substance of my talk today. So those of you who may have tuned in to see the psychic Kelvin, he's not showing up today, and those of you who know me know that I have lots of communications with folks on the other side, and nobody has a crystal ball. Even all of my friends who I communicate with fairly regularly on the other side, nobody has a crystal ball because we live in a free will universe. Yes, some people may have insights and perspectives and visions or views of probabilities, but we live in a probability-filled universe. We do not live in a predetermined, fixed, this is the destiny universe. No, we have free will minds, and all of these minds operating all the time change things all the time. So there's no way that it is going to be. There are ways that it can be, and we're going to talk about that in my talk today. Okay? So let's just open it up to the floor of the live folks who are on the call now. Any questions in terms of meditation? Questions or comments in terms of the meditation? And again, if anybody's having issues with audio or anything like that, feel free to type in your chat box there, and I can see what you're typing. Okay. I do not have my texts open, although they do pop up, and I did see a couple of texts pop up, and I did see that. Read those quickly, but long texts I can't read. Okay. Questions about meditation. So the main thing I want to say before we meditate together, and you can interrupt me, anybody who's live on the call who might think of something, is to keep the technique easy. Those of you who don't know me, I teach a technique called Turning Within meditation. I learned TM meditation in 1970, 50 years ago. I've been meditating for 50 years. Yeah, 50. You heard that right. I don't even feel 50 years old, but I've been meditating that long, and been teaching it for 47 years now. Thousands of people, don't know how many, north of 5,000 people, as I said, over 30 countries around the world, teaching live, but on video conference or on the phone. But the technique that I teach is a very easy technique. There's no focus, no controlling of the mind. So just a reminder to those of you who are on here now, who are my students, and who may be watching the recording, who are my meditation students, just a reminder of some key points. No focusing, no control, no clearing the mind. That means that whatever your mind is thinking, whatever is going on in your mind, normally, naturally, sometimes I use the word involuntarily, we allow that to happen. And then we're overlaying on top of that allowing process the specific technique that I've taught each of you. Coming back to the sound, you realize you're off of it. Doesn't matter how you come back to it. Sometimes it will come clearly. Sometimes it'll come like a faint idea. Sometimes it'll come very abstractly. Sometimes it'll come like a more clear pronunciation. It will come in all various forms at various times, and we don't care. We are in a observational, involuntarily conscious mode when we're meditating. So we're aware what's going on, but we don't care what's going on. So it's like, that's an interesting tagline, isn't it? We're aware, but we don't care. That's the thing in this meditation. Aware, but don't care. I've taught a family of 5, mother, father, 3 kids, and I think the kids were around 10 to 12 years old to about 16 years old, the three kids. And the youngest one, I'd say, so what's the best attitude, Thomas? And I'd say, the I don't care attitude. It's the I don't care. Exactly. I don't care what's going on. That's the best attitude, because what that does is it frees you up from the focusing part of our mind, which is just a small part of our mind. And it allows our mind to expand its conscious capacity of experience outside of that small focusing part of our mind to the rest of our mind, which is vast, which is huge. And so that's the trick in the technique, is to allow the mind to go to wherever it needs to go, whatever it needs to think or feel, emotionally or physically. An aching foot, like I hurt my foot. Those of you may have, on my social media, may have seen me with my foot wrapped up playing basketball. You know, things happen. And so when I'm meditating, where do you think my mind went during my meditation? My attention went to my foot, because my foot hurt and I had injured it. So there's a throbbing going on in my foot. Well, I just allow my mind to be there on that throbbing sensation. And then when my mind started thinking other things like, oh, wow, man, maybe I should have tied my laces better before I went and played for 10 minutes and got back in my car. I have that thought during my meditation. So this is actually thoughts that I had during my meditation. And then I know that my mind is obviously not locked on to the throbbing ankle foot, or it was actually heel, the bottom of my foot. It's not throbbing there. Okay, now I'm thinking about what I should have done. I should have laced my sneakers up tighter to probably avoid this injury. Now I could go back to the sound. That's my point. So my mind has wandered off. It's wandered off of being locked in to the throbbing heel pain sensation. And now I'm thinking about what I should have done. I should have laced my shoes up better. Okay, now I can just shift and go back to the sound. So it's a shifting. It's not a focusing. Focusing I define as holding on to something, concentrating, holding on to something. That's how I define focusing. That's why I say we don't focus in our meditation, but we are shifting our attention. So it's just a shift back to the sound. And the beauty of the sound is it has no meaning. And the no meaning value is what? Meaning causes our mind to be directed. TV, I think TV, electricity, screen, blah, 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 electronics. I see a guitar, I think, oh, music, blah, blah, blah. I think I haven't played my guitar in a long time, unlike John and Harpo here. So, I think these thoughts go through my mind. My mind gets directed towards different things because most things in our life have meaning. Well, the beauty of the sound is it has no meaning. Therefore, it gives you something to think. Therefore, your mind is conscious, it's aware, but it's undirected. It's not being made to go in any particular direction. No meaning. It's just kind of randomly allowed to think. The mind is allowed to randomly think whatever. Okay? And the beauty of that is what happens then is the turning within process takes over, which is a natural tendency of the mind to want to go this way when we turn within. Naturally turns within, naturally starts to go inside. If we can have those two conditions, conscious yet undirected. Conscious mind yet undirected mind allows the mind to go inward. Okay? So that's, and sometimes people, I've talked to several people this week, some of my meditation students, they say, well, what's the difference between that and just closing your eyes and letting your mind just think whatever? Well, the difference is if you're closing your mind and just letting your mind think whatever, your mind is going to think whatever with direction, because all of that whatever has meaning to it. And inevitably, because we are so meaning oriented, we are so focus and meaning oriented, those two things, focus and meaning oriented, in our waking state lives, which is appropriate in waking state, We will default to that if we just close our eyes and let our mind wander and go here and there. That will be the default. We will tend to follow the meaning of the stuff in a more conscious and directed way. So that's why the sound is an important part. It's a tool to train the mind in meditation to be in a more undirected, free-flowing state, undirected without any caring about association with meaning. Okay? So that's the overview. Any questions, any specifics about that? That's the overview with some specifics in terms of how I teach the meditation. All right? Questions before we meditate? All right. So I'm going to walk you through the step-by-step process that I do. And we just do this, just a reminder to the folks, we just do this when I'm doing the meditation with you. And those of you who have access, my students who have access to the virtual version of this online on YouTube, should meditate with me this way anytime you feel like it. And thank you again to John, who's on the call now, for the idea and the steps of how to put this on your YouTube, the virtual version of this, on your YouTube library, so you can just go click, click, and not have to go to the password protected page on my website. So, great. Let's start. Okay, so we'll just sit comfortably first. Again, position does not matter. Whatever position is comfortable for you, that's what's most important. So just sit comfortably first and close the eyes. Let's open our eyes. Now again, let's close our eyes. Again, let's open our eyes. So when we close our eyes, naturally we feel some quietness inside, right? Everyone feels some quietness inside, right? Okay, let's close our eyes again. Good. Let's close our eyes again. Again, let's open our eyes. So still feel some quietness when we close the eyes, right? Everyone feels some quietness still, yeah? And in that quietness, I'm sure you noticed you had some thoughts, some mental activity, some thoughts pop up in the mind, right? Good. And you probably also noticed how easily, how effortlessly the thoughts are just there, right? It's automatically, there they are, the thoughts pop up in my mind, right? Good. So that's just how easily, just how effortlessly we should think the sound. Okay, so this time when we close the eyes, we just sit easily, and after about half a minute or so, start to think the sound in that same easy, effortless way we think any other thought, and we'll meditate together. Okay? I'll keep track of the time. Let's close our eyes. Keep the eyes closed and just rest for a few minutes. I'll keep track of the time. If you want to lie down now to rest, you can lie down or just sit back or whatever. I'll let you know when the time is up. Slowly open the eyes. Easy, comfortable, easy for everyone? Yeah, so it's just the normal, natural process of thinking the sound and then basically taking it as it comes, right? Keep it easy and simple. Easy and simple. Whatever happens, happens, right? And even if we don't feel deep, we don't come out fast, we always take the 5 minutes, 10 minutes rest period on the back end, okay? I think you've heard me say many times, get into a minimum rest period on the back end of 5 minutes. You want to rest longer, there's no maximum amount of length of rest time on the back end. You can rest as long as you want. But it's really important because that helps integrate, makes permanent the effects, the benefits of the meditation, the rest period on the back end. So you're just lying there or sitting there with your eyes closed, letting your mind go wherever. That's the only distinction between that and the meditation part, is that you're just letting your mind go wherever in the rest period, right? You're not going back to the mechanics of the technique part. Okay? Questions? Anything before we continue? Okay? All right. So, great. So let's talk about these ideas that I have about how to think more clearly, 2020 vision, in 2020 about our lives in order to be more productive, happier, and more effective in 2020. So, first of all, I want to just say something kind of global first, which is, I think a big part of the barrier for many people to be happy, being happy, is what I call the perfection myth. People think that things have to be perfect in order for them to be happy. And I want to adjust that thinking and pose and suggest a different way of looking at happiness, as measuring it more in terms of incremental improvements as opposed to trying and striving for a state of perfection, because perfection never ever materializes. It will never ever be there. Nothing is ever perfect. We can strive for a more ideal state of climate, state of politics, state of family, state of relationship, whatever, fill in the blank, but nothing will ever be perfect, static, perfection. So instead, shifting and thinking about improvement, like incremental, significant improvements, we should rejoice and be happy about that instead. So let's just step back. Let's talk about the elephants in the room. So the elephants in the room, I would say the concerns about the future, now that we're in 2020, and it's been going on for some time, but now it's 2020 January now. I would say there's three big things going on in the world. There's tribalism, there's the growth of authoritarian governments, and climate change. Those are the three big things that people are worried about, I'd say. And I'm not going to get into each of those in great detail. I'm going to touch on them in this little mini talk for 15, 20 minutes now. The next 15 or 20 minutes now. So I'm not going to get into all the details of those, because I'm not an expert on any of those, right? But I do have a perspective on how to approach all of that. So first of all, I say, I think we need to step back. Regards to any of those issues, or add some other issues that may not be one of those three issues in your minds, it doesn't really matter what the presenting issue is. The first thing I suggest that we do is we step back and we say, okay, as compared to what? So most people in the world are living in a world of non-knowledge, we'll call it. We'll call it misperceptions, illusions about reality. And the facts are, for example, if we look historically, Because a lot of people are thinking, well, it's so terrible now. 2020, the world is a mess. It's going to fall apart. The world's going to blow up. People are really fearful. And I think the level of fear in the world is very, very high. Based on my memories going back thousands and thousands of years, I'd say the fear level is pretty high now compared to other times in history. And there are various reasons for that. But I want to try to reduce the level of fear. And so think about it. Here are some facts to consider. The Battle of Cannae that happened about 2,200, 2,300 years ago between the Romans and the Carthaginians. In that one battle, 70,000 people died in about 5 hours. 70,000 soldiers died in about 5 to 6 hours in one battle. 70,000. The world population at the time was around 700 million people. Okay? If you do the math and compare that to today's population of 7.6 billion people, that would be the equivalent of 760,000 people dying in 5 to 6 hours in one battle today in 2020. So think about that. People romanticize the past and they think, oh, it was so much better then. It's never been this bad now. No, it was a lot worse in the past. And that's just one battle. Now, that may have been historically, at least in historical records, because there were eyewitnesses who saw this, and they vary from 70,000 to 100,000 people killed in that one 5 to 6 hour battle. So I'm using the lower number, okay, from certain on-site observers who were sitting up on the hills, historians watching this battle unfold. So we got to keep perspective about these things. It's the fear level, I think, is astronomical in the world today. I think it should not be that high, based on the realities, the facts of what's gone on in the past. I think there's a sense of people in the world today in 2020 that the world is an incredibly violent place. There's a feeling, there's a sense, there's a feeling that people have about it being an incredibly violent place. And so I want to draw a distinction between how we feel, what we feel is going on, and what's actually going on in your immediate life. They're not the same. And so it's important for us to help us reduce our fears by not equating how we're feeling based on what we're seeing on television or in social media, based on what's actually going on the ground in our lives. And so this number, think about it, 760,000 people dying in 5 to 6 hours on planet Earth in one battle, okay? That's the equivalent of what happened at the Battle of Cannae 2,300 years ago. Another fact, anthropologists look at skeletons, and they can tell by looking at how somebody died, a blow to the head, a skull that was cracked open with a knife, with a sword, that kind of those violent deaths, or just the bones being crushed in a way that's not a normal death. Based on analysis of skeletons 5,000 years ago, the estimate is that 10 to 20% of the human population died violently, versus today it's well under 1% of the world's population dies a violent death. So that's another little factor to kind of keep in mind. TV is kind of a double-edged sword. It kind of informs us, it entertains us, which is a good thing. But with the news cycle, the 24-hour news cycle, in order to keep their advertisers happy and keep people watching, they do a lot of fear-based stuff. And they feed us with a 24/7 cycle of 2 people or 6 people or 12 people or 20 people horrifically getting killed. One person dying is a terrible thing. look, I do grief recovery, so I'm not demeaning the loss. I'm trying to give a perspective in our world about the level of fear, and is it based on fact, or is it based on a perception that is being created, by various sources, one of which is the media in our world. But TV, as I said, double-edged, because it's helpful. It's been very helpful in showing us humans what war is really like and how horrific it can be. So I think that there's a movement worldwide over history, over thousands of years, to not treat war as cavalierly as we have in the past. That's a good thing. I think television is one. Television and cameras and photographs and so forth, the technology there, in other words, I think has been helpful in terms of moving the needle away from just knee-jerking and going to war. That's not to say that we don't, as humans, still have humans amongst us who knee-jerk and go to war without thinking strategically, without thinking about the consequences and the death and so forth that happens as a result of it. But, another factoid, just a more current one, you look at World War II. In those 6 years of World War II, 70 to 85 million people died in 6 years. That's 3% of the world population at the time, which was around 2.3 billion people. As I said, that's compared to 7.6 billion people today. So then that was about an average to about 30,000 people a day worldwide were dying. You imagine what the news cycle would be like today if that was happening. But life came back fairly normal after that, fairly quickly. Why is that? So on a positive note, I think there's a flexibility, there's a resiliency to the human mind, to the human spirit, to the human psychology, because I don't think humans are built to be in a destructive mode. They are not built to be that way. Yes, we have a history. We have a violent history over thousands of years, which, as I just laid out factually, has changed in more recent history, right? So my point is that we need to not buy into the fear. This is the second point. First point is facts. Look at the facts. Have perspective. The second point is don't buy into the fear. Fear is food for authoritarian thinking. If we're worried about an increase in authoritarian governments and leadership in the world today, what's that based on? That is based on fear. Authoritarians feed off of fear. They plant fear in people's minds in order to get the people to go, okay, we need that one leader. No longer have, a more democratic government, have more of an authoritarian government. That's why throughout the world, and I'm dealing with countries, like I told you guys at the beginning, 30 people from 30 countries. So I'm not talking just the United States. I'm talking about worldwide to all of my clients now. Don't buy into that. Dogma and blind faith need fear to be successful. So that only feeds the authoritarian governments. Okay? Somebody just joined. If you could just mute, that would be awesome. Thank you. I just muted you. So again, fear clouds our clear thinking. It's about 2020 vision, right? We want 2020 thinking. We want clear thinking. Clear thinking is what's needed for greater political and religious freedom and environmental responsibility. To come up with solutions that are more responsible for climate change, etc., etc. Whatever it is, whatever your thing is. Again, I just listed those 3 things that I hear a lot of from my clients, but You may have something else that's top of your mind in terms of what you feel socially, environmentally, politically, whatever, needs to be changed. Again, I'm not here to talk about the specifics. I'm an embracer of whatever people believe and think is their important thing. Well, clearer thinking is what's going to bring about those changes that are going to be more holistic and more effective and inclusive and in whatever way that you think is appropriate. So trying new ideas comes from freedom of thought. It has to be a mind freer from fear, from the belief. You have to come from a belief place where you feel like you can accomplish something. And that has to be, and you're not going to come from that place if you're coming from a fear-based, a contracted place. Think about it. Survival mode. If you are in survival mode, it is difficult to be self-aware. It's difficult to be thinking about other people because you are in survival mode. You're thinking about yourself and surviving. I get it. Those of you who know me know that I've been laid off from my job 5 times since I was 50 years old. You talk about age discrimination and it's unseen in the United States, and I'm sure it happens elsewhere in the world too, but I live here in the United States, and I've applied for jobs, hundreds of jobs since I was 50 years old, the 5 times I was laid off, and never, my resume, I never got a call back. I'm sure it went into the circular file, into the wastebasket, hundreds of times, because age discrimination is the hidden discrimination that nobody can really prove in the United States, or probably elsewhere in the world too, right? I've been there. I've been in survival mode. I've had to raise a family of four, 2 children and so forth. Me being the sole breadwinner in the family, with no income. That's a very stressful survival mode to be in. Survival mode place to be in. So I've been there. I know what that fear likes, and it runs rampant in you when you're in survival mode. So if we understand that, then I think a couple things out of that. I think we need to be patient with those individuals and countries in the world who are still in survival mode. We should not, I don't think, because it's a violation of free will, for one thing, number one. Number two, we should not force other people to try to get out of survival mode, because you can't. You can't force somebody to get out of survival mode. They got to get out of survival mode themselves, to get out of the fear mode. You can't force somebody to be not fearful. You could give them tools. This is what I do with my nonprofit work, and I've done this with many of you, of course. We can give people tools to help them get out. And sure, we should be doing that. We should be doing that as individuals, as loving individuals, for other people, whether they share the same belief system as I do or not. Look, I'm teaching a lot of clients. We don't have the same political beliefs. We don't have the same religious beliefs. We don't have the same beliefs in a lot of things, probably. Maybe we don't have the same beliefs in terms of how to raise children. I don't know. I don't get into that stuff with people. But my point is that we need to allow people to be where they are. And if they're in survival mode, give them tools, but give them time. We need to give them time, and we need to do that politically as well, I would argue. What about this idea of tribalism? So a few thoughts on tribalism. You know what tribalism is? It's the tribe thing. It's like, it's my tribe against your tribe. In the Middle East, it's the Sunnis against the Shiites. Look, I was dealing with that. Those of you know who I've past lives. I was dealing with that in the Third Crusades. I remember my dealing with Saladin. Saladin, the leader of the Muslims who I was fighting around Jerusalem and all of that. My biggest asset, in a sense, strategically, that at that time, was Saladin, who was Sunni, I believe. he had all these infighting and fights he had to deal with the Shiites. We're talking 1,000 years ago. That fight has been going on for thousands and thousands of years over there. There are tribal fights going on throughout the world, not just in terms of religious, but in terms of genetics. Certain views of people, looking at people from a tribal standpoint. You're not you're not as tall as I am. You're not as dark as I am. Skin color. There's all this tribalism that goes on throughout the world. How to deal with that? Here's some thoughts on this. It's the my way is the only way, or the my way is the highway, or I'm better than you. It's the importance of being important that I've written on at other times. We need to find ways to have discussions that are interest-based. What does that mean? What's the interests of that other tribe? How can we talk to that other group in a way that meets some of their interests? Maybe we don't agree on everything, but we look for where's the overlap of the two circles. The Venn diagram, those of you know what that means. We need to be less principle-based. I'm right, you're wrong, what's the rule, what's the law? The caste system is another example. The caste system is another example of this tribalism. And it's not, it's an unfortunate outgrowth of the notion of karma and dharma. The caste system is was an unseen consequence of that. That's a whole other discussion that some of you have heard me give tidbits of that, or a more detailed discussion. It's a tidbit right now. At the end of the day, we have to respect each other. We have to respect each other's free will to make decisions, and we have to agree to disagree sometimes. Because war, as I've said, we have historically grown and gotten more educated about the terrible stuff about war. We are less violent now in 2020 than we were over the last 5,000 years. So it has gotten better, but there's still lots of room for improvement, of course. Look at China as an example of a situation where I think, from a political standpoint, we don't need to go in as America, for example, and do nation building and take over a country and say you have to be like the United States, and if you're not like the United States in every aspect, then we want to fight you. That's ridiculous. Look at China. It may never look like the USA, but it's a heck of a lot better now than it was in 1949 when Mao went, the Cultural Revolution, or in 1967, when they had the whole rebirth of that in China, and children were outing their parents and sending their parents to death. 10-year-old children in China in 1967. Go read your history. It was horrific. China has gotten a lot better. Now, China is still a mess in terms of, in my opinion, again, just my opinion, about from a social justice standpoint and a religious tolerance and so forth standpoint. But it has gotten a lot better. And they've adopted some of our freedoms in the United States. We should rejoice in that, but not try to make them exactly like us. That's the thing. They have to make themselves. We cannot be going around and so making other countries to forcing them. That's what I mean about not forcing people out of various modes that they're in, whether in survival mode or they're in a little bit of a stage outside of a survival mode, so they're doing better, but they're still not, and they're still thinking in the way that they're thinking. There's almost like, I view this as a way of maybe globally, allowing tribalism on a country level almost. You know what I mean? It's like, let them be their tribe in that country, and then we're our tribe in this way, and let's figure out where the overlap of the Venn diagram is so that we can work together. As opposed to trying to make everybody like the way our founding fathers in the United States envisioned the United States. the fact that they view this as an ideal way, look, they viewed it as an experiment. It was an experiment these guys were thinking of. Well, let's just try this out. Well, this is an ongoing experiment, the United States. It doesn't mean that it is the only way. So, some other thoughts as we close here. I understand why we are more comfortable with other people who are like us, but I reserve that for my close circle, as opposed to suggesting that we need to change everybody else in the world to be like us. My close circle of friends, yeah. My close circle of friends, I choose to have them be more like me. It's a friendship thing. But I have various circles of friends, and some of my friends have very, very different views from each other, and yet I'm still friends with them. So because I'm the guy who looks where's the overlap of that Venn diagram, and that's where I rejoice in my friendships. I think that's something that we could think about politically, geopolitically, as a different way to look at how we interact with each other. And some politicians do look at that. I'm not the initiator of this thought. This is not a new thought, but I think it's the more effective way of going forward, as we're talking about 2020 vision here. So here's another positive note. Let me end with you with this positive note. I think there is an inherent self-regulatory, self-corrective trait in human behavior. So as I look at history over thousands of years, and I look at where we're at now, I think there's a self-corrective trait that we have. The self-corrective trait is the desire for happiness and freedom. Look at it in China. You're dealing with an authoritarian government there. A communist, authoritarian, a totalitarian government. The people are not standing for it. They are doing things that are in the direction of more freedom because they feel happier when they're freer. It's a natural human tendency. I think the authoritarian nature, whether it's here or in other countries or whatever, is going to dissipate because there's an inherent tendency for happiness and freedom. Freedom is a huge part of the component of happiness for human beings. Does fear slow down that self-correction that I'm talking about? Yes. That's why I do what I do. That's why I encourage you to reduce the fear and not increase fear in other people, because fear to me is the detractor. That's what's going to slow down the self-correction. Chaos is not the desired state for human beings. We do not want chaos. Humans, happiness is also associated with order, predictability, a little bit more certainty. People are happier with a little bit more certainty, not chaos. Authoritarians will use chaos, and they're chaos creators, and they do that. Why? Because they want to create more fear. They want to play on that, but don't buy into it. That buying into the fear is buying into the authoritarian playbook. That is the number one playbook element of an authoritarian. So when you see that, you see it for what it is. So again, to sum up, what are we looking for to be happy? We're looking for incremental improvement. That's what we want. Do not make your happiness dependent on a state of perfection, because then you'll never be happy. Perfection never ever exists. Now strive for an ideal. Yes, but don't base your happiness on having reached that state of perfection ideal. Okay? Make your happiness dependent on incremental improvement. And I think we see that. We see incremental improvement in the human culture. And so the last thing I want to leave you with is this. your personal contribution to making a better civilization is your personal happiness. Think about that. Yes, you can also do something. Look at the work that I do. You can actively do something. Help people who are dealing with caregivers or who may have dying loved ones. You do that good bereavement work, but understand that your happiness is also a very real contribution to the world civilization, to making the world a better place. It starts with each of us in our own personal happiness and reducing our fear in order to increase the happiness and increase the freedom that we all feel. Because freedom ultimately comes from inside. Then it gets expressed outside, externally, right? So hopefully these thoughts have been helpful. Just stir some thinking in your mind to think, have a different perspective on the world and to be less fearful about what's going on. Because yes, 2020 is unknown. We're at the beginning. It's January 4th. We don't know how it's going to unfold and so forth. We don't know what's going to go on in 2021, 2022. But we each can prepare ourselves by keeping facts in mind and not just by going on feelings that are created by external sources in our lives, whether it be people, whether it be conversations like I had at the pool the other day with the guy in the lane next to me who wanted to talk politics with me. Oh my God, that's the last thing I want to do. I'm just here swimming, doing my laps, And then the guy goes, okay, I guess you don't want to talk about politics. How about religion? This guy, swear to God, the guy said this to me. He goes, well, I went to church this morning. And I said, great, awesome, you went to church. The last thing I want to do is talk about politics and religion. I'm swimming here, exercising, chilling out. Anyway, oh my goodness. So, any questions, comments, anything? The people who are live on the call, feel free. Take this person off of mute, who I muted here.
I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. But I love you, Kelvin.
Yeah. So, reduce our fears in the world. That's the thing, And then and it doesn't matter what your beliefs are. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are. Embrace your beliefs. Improve the thinking, how clearly you're thinking about them. Go with what works for you. But reduce your fears. Improve your happiness. And your happiness is a good way to measure your fear. So people wonder sometimes, how do I know if I'm happy? Well, how if I know if I'm fearful? Well, are you a happy person? And are you content inside? So contentment is the way I look at it, as opposed to peaks and valleys, happiness, sadness, Any other thoughts? So food for thought. Great having everybody on, and hopefully it was helpful for people. Think about these thoughts and take what works, discard what doesn't work for you. That's always my message to everybody. You've heard me say this a million times, those of you who've been in my lectures before. Okay? Have a great day. Take care.
Thanks, Kelvin. You too.
Take care.
Thanks, Kel.
See ya.